People constantly ask me, what is your favorite movie? Well, I'm not very good at picking a favorite, but I can tell you a whole bunch of my favorites. So today I'm gonna give you my favorite movie from every year that I've been alive. So let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean Chandler, and I started this channel because I was driving everyone around me crazy talking about movies way too much. If you can relate, you're probably in the right place and consider clicking that subscribe button. As I go into this and share my favorite movie from every year that I've been alive, go ahead and tell me down below in the comment section, what's your favorite movie from every year that you've been alive, or at least some of the years that you have been alive. This should be a fun discussion because we're talking about favorites. I'm not trying to pick the best movie of each of these years. I'm not trying to impress you. These are the movies that I love to watch and that mean the most to me. So there's gonna be a few goofy picks inside of this list. Also, before we get started, this video is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook of your choice and a 30-day free trial of Audible at audibletrial.com/Sean Chandler. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. I'm actually a huge fan of Audible. Last year, I listened to over 50 books on Audible. I recommend checking out How Star Wars Conquered the Universe. It's a great book on George Lucas and the history of Star Wars in general. You can listen to it for free or any other book you choose at audibletrial.com/Sean Chandler. With that said, let's get started with the year I was born, 1981. And my favorite movie of that year? Raiders of the Lost Ark. For me, this is probably the greatest adventure film of all time. It's so nicely paced. It's such a fun world with a great central character, and there's just so many memorable lines, memorable sequences, and it's practical stunt work. I love the chase sequence in this one, so it's easily one of my favorite movies of all time. 1982, I'm gonna go with, there's a lot of good movies that came out that summer. You had E.T., you had Blade Runner. I'm going with Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. If you don't know, I'm a huge Star Trek fan. My sister, mother, and I, we went to Star Trek conventions all throughout the 90s. And for me, this is the best of the Star Trek movies. It has a lot of deep themes about life, death, purpose, what we're meant here to do, the consequences of our choices throughout life. There's just a bunch of introspective stuff inside of this film, but it also has some great action sequences, some great special effects work, and I love the score to this film by James Horner. It's kind of one of the forgotten classics, if you ask me. Then we're gonna go to 1983 with Star Wars: The Return of the Jedi. Now, I'm a big Star Wars fan, love the original trilogy and so much of the Star Wars universe, and this movie delivered a lot of great emotional moments, whether you're talking about the Luke Invader stuff on Death Star 2, or whether you're talking about just this fantastic space battle. Actually, for my money, the space battle in the third act of this film is the greatest space battle that has ever been put on film ever. So this movie has a whole bunch of high peak source of moments for me that I absolutely love. I think it's the weakest of the original trilogy, but a weak Star Wars movie from that original trilogy is still a very, very good movie for me. That brings us to 1984, and this was a tough one for me. I have two written down. I haven't actually decided which one I'm gonna go with. Do I go with Ghostbusters or do I go with The Karate Kid? And I think I have to go with Ghostbusters. One of the reasons for that is that this channel, Sean Chandler Talks About, was started when the Ghostbusters reboot with the ladies came out back in 2016. And so I owe a debt of gratitude to the Ghostbusters franchise. Karate Kid is also fantastic. But as for right now, this is just a movie with such a great concept to it of Ghostbusters. People like spooky things, they like comedy, they like a little bit of action, they like a little bit of sci-fi, and it mixes it all together. And part of what makes this movie so interesting is that the lead characters are scientists, they're not action heroes, they shouldn't be so much fun to watch, but they just crafted a great set of characters and cast great actors that have great chemistry with one another, and it makes for a movie that you just love to watch. It's so quotable, rewatchable, and so for me, this one beats out Karate Kid, which I wish I could put Karate Kid in here too. With 1985, we're gonna go with Back to the Future. I love time travel stories. I love a good comedy. And this is just such a fun concept for a film of a present day high schooler, or now a high schooler from 30 years ago, going back to his parents when they were in high school and just seeing all the culture shock, seeing his parents in a different place and time. It's such a nicely crafted script with so many little details inside of it that are easy to miss, but they thought through everything as they made this movie. The cast was great, the humor lands, and it hits all the emotional moments with all the character arcs, and so it easily makes this list. For 1986, we are going with Aliens. There's two types of people in the world, people that prefer Alien and people that prefer Aliens. I am absolutely an Aliens person. I love the early work of James Cameron, where he just brought so much energy and creativity into making these big sci-fi action blockbusters, and Aliens is one of those films. It has the scares, it has the action. I just love the idea that they're just surrounded by the aliens, engulfing them. We got Marines, machine guns, technology, all that great stuff. And I love that Sigourney Weaver's Ripley is both the great soldier character, but she's also very maternal. She doesn't lose any of her femininity while she's grabbing machine guns and blowing down aliens. So I love this movie. 1987, we are going with Predator, a great Arnold Schwarzenegger film, and probably the biggest compliment I can give Predator is I don't normally think about it as an Arnold Schwarzenegger film. The film itself, the direction, the plot, I think actually are able to overcome the persona that is Arnold Schwarzenegger. In almost all of his films, he dominates the screen and everything going on. Even in the Terminator movies, I just think about them as Arnold Schwarzenegger films, even though they're James Cameron films, because he has such a strong presence on screen. And here, John McTiernan was able to make the story, even though it's a very simple story, take front and center stage away from Arnold Schwarzenegger. And of course, he's great inside the movie. It's one of the most macho movies of all time. This is one of the movies that when I was growing up, I watched it late at night on cable, and it kind of freaked me out a little bit the first time that I watched it, and I've loved it ever since. 1988, we are going with what I think is the greatest direct, straight action movie of all time, Die Hard. This is one of those movies that, once again, I think the way the script was written, this is the type of movie where I think it's just wonderfully crafted. The word I probably use a little bit too much. But from the very beginning of the film, when you have dialogue with John McClane on the plane, it sets up little details about him that make sense as to causing tension and conflict later in the film about him, about being afraid of flying. Someone gives him this weird, goofy cure about taking his shoes off. And this is so important for things that happen later in the film. Little lines of dialogue between characters in the beginning seriously matter later in the film. And then of course you just have some great stunt work, some great action, and if you're paying attention, that's 2 years in a row with a John McTiernan movie making it as my favorite movie of that year. Then we're gonna go to 1989, and I've got to go with, there's a lot of great movies that came out that year. You had Batman, Lethal Weapon 2. I think I gotta go with Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Now, like I said, there's a lot of great movies that year. I thought about not including this one because I already included an Indiana Jones movie, but at the end of the day, I think that this one is running equal parallel right there with Raiders of the Lost Ark for great adventure films of all time. And they found a way to not just rehash what they did before, even though there's some similarities to Raider, but by bringing in Sean Connery as the father, you get this great chemistry between father and son, the banter back and forth, and it adds an emotional weight that wasn't there in Raiders of the Lost Ark, that in its own ways elevates it above that film. And so I had to include this one on here as well. For 1990, we're going with the Christmas classic, the ultimate child actor of all time, Macaulay Culkin's Home Alone. Now keep in mind, I was the perfect age for both Home Alone 1 and 2 when they first came out. As someone that was 9 years old when this film originally debuted, Macaulay Culkin is just a little bit older than me, and so I got to see it as a child. I got to grow up watching it, and now I get to show it to my own children, and it is just such a delightful Christmas movie, a family movie exploring things about, well, his kind of terrible parents, nice character arc in the mix, and of course the fantastic finale where he starts to torture criminals in his home. 1991, we have a movie that is competition for Die Hard for the greatest action movie of all time, Terminator 2, Judgment Day. If you throw sci-fi action into the mix, I don't know which one of these two movies I prefer over the other one. They take the original kind of action horror concept of the original Terminator film and just kind of blow it up into this massive sci-fi action film that has heart, it has amazing stunt work, it has amazing special effects, and when it comes to Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, one of the great Arnold Schwarzenegger films inside of this one. I've just always loved this movie. I didn't see it in the theater, but I saw it right after it came to home video, and it's been one of my favorites ever since. 1992, we're gonna go with actually my favorite Tom Cruise film, With a Few Good Men. This is one of these movies that a lot of people talk about it in reference to Jack Nicholson's performance in the courtroom scene, and you can't handle the truth. But for me, this is a movie that works as a whole. It's an Alan Sorkin script based off an Alan Sorkin play. So there's just great characters, great dialogue throughout the whole film. It's kind of a courtroom drama, and it's just always hit the right notes for me. I did see this one in the theater when it first came out, one of the early rated R films that I saw in the theater, and still to this day, I just love this film. 1993, we are going with Jurassic Park, one of the great classic sci-fi thrillers that really made you believe that dinosaurs were real. Okay, I didn't actually believe that dinosaurs were real, but like we had never seen special effects like this before. That first scene when they drive up and they're seeing these plants and looking at the leaves, and then they see dinosaurs for the first time, combined with the John Williams score and everything, it's just such a majestic scene. Add to that, you've got great characters that represent different points of view of how people will respond to if dinosaurs were a real thing, and then that leads into the third act where the dinosaurs start to eat people, and it gets fantastic. And this just makes for a great, well-rounded film. Brings us to 1994. There's several picks I could go with here. You got Forrest Gump, you've got Shawshank Redemption. I'm gonna go with Pulp Fiction. This guy named Quentin Tarantino kind of came out of nowhere with his second film that just kind of blew up the scene because it was an indie film that made an enormous amount of money. It was told out of order. It didn't play by any of the rules, and it just kind of worked because it just had great characters, great world building, great dialogue, and played together in this intriguing manner where it told these individual stories about kind of this weekend with these stories that crossed over but told in different sequence order. Just such a unique way of telling films, and it was hugely influential. Even like guys like some guy named Christopher Nolan made a movie called Memento that was told out of order, that was probably very much influenced by this Pulp Fiction movie, and that went well for this Christopher Nolan fellow. And so this is a movie that makes it onto my list. 1995, we're going with Braveheart. This came out when I was in middle school. I got to see it in the theater. At the time, I was still scared of watching violence on screen, and so half the movie I was like, doing that number, trying not to see guys' arms and legs getting cut off and throats being slit, all that fun stuff. But at the same time, even though I didn't watch half the movie, I loved the entire movie. I mean, it's just kind of this big, epic film about a resistance fighter trying to earn freedom for Scotland. Great performances, amazing score, an amazing speech from William Wallace, a great Mel Gibson performance all around. Just a film that works, won Best Picture for good reason. I love this one. For 1996, I think I'm gonna go with Independence Day. Of all the films I could pick for this year, this is a dumb movie. A very dumb movie. An amazingly fun, dumb movie as well. This is the one that kind of took Will Smith to that next level. I mean, he'd been a rapper successful, he'd been Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and successful, he'd done Bad Boys and been successful. And then there's A-list, biggest star in the world, Will Smith, and this is the movie that did that. And likewise, you get kind of the continued rise of Jeff Goldblum. They had such great chemistry on screen. You can take two guys with totally different charismas, put them on screen together, and it just makes for a movie that's an absolute blast to watch. Watching the world getting blown to pieces, and then guys flying into space and using a Macintosh to connect to an alien spaceship doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But boy, did I love this movie. 1997, we're going with Good Will Hunting. I love stories about people's potential being discovered, and we'll talk about this same theme very shortly in another movie. And that's what this movie is all about. It's about Will, who is this guy that's a janitor that has an incredible mind, and then he's being mentored by this psychiatrist who's a great psychiatrist, but he's kind of hasn't necessarily pursued fame. And it just makes for this film that has all these really powerful moments of just exploring what we truly value, what we really want, and what kind of drives our actions. And this one's interesting because this is the movie that really put Matt Damon and Ben Affleck on the map, because they teamed up to write the script for it, and they won the Oscar for Best Screenplay. Some people forget Ben Affleck won an Oscar for Best Screenplay over 20 years ago. In 1998, we're going in the opposite direction from Oscar-winning stuff to Armageddon. This is my personal favorite Michael Bay film. Some people hate this movie, and I'm not going to hold it against you. I totally get it. It is a ridiculous film. It is a stupid film. The basic concept of it, of taking oil drillers and making them astronauts after a weekend space camp, totally ridiculous. But it is so fun while it's ridiculous. They get this whole gigantic set of fun actors to play over-the-top caricatures of themselves, and we have fun as they become astronauts to try and blow up this gigantic asteroid heading towards the Earth. So all of Michael Bay's over-the-topisms are present here. You get to see all of Michael Bayisms in space, which is amazing. 1999, I'm going with The Matrix. Now, this is a movie that the first time I saw it in the theater, I thought, this isn't all that good. Like, it's just like the Terminator mixed with John Woo gunplay, a little bit of Jet Li martial arts, and some anime sorts of plot lines in there. They stole all these ideas. And then it like clicked in my mind the second time I watched it. Right, they took everything that I love, and they took philosophy, and they put all of it in one movie, in one awesome movie. They did all of it well, and they made it a much more mainstream version that's very easy to watch, has all the emotional moments, has all the fantastic action. And so this is one of the great action movies. It's one of the great science fiction movies. It's one of the great martial arts movies of the last 25 years, all wrapped up into one film. In the year 2000, I'm going to go with Unbreakable. It's actually been a little bit of an M. Night Shyamalan-assance as of recently, because Glass came out just a couple weeks ago. So I've been talking about him a whole lot. I've watched all of his movies within the last 2 weeks, and my favorite of the bunch is Unbreakable. This is a movie that, as I just mentioned, I love stories about people's untapped potential being discovered and having them find their purpose and getting to be who they're supposed to be. I love those types of stories. They resonate with me on a heart level, and that's what this is. It's a slow movie. It's character driven. It's not action based, but it does so well to kind of hit all the right emotional notes. And it's interesting to me because it's a film that it was so far ahead of its time as a superhero story before superhero movies became the dominant force at the box office. And so I just love this movie, and it's held up very, very well. For the year 2001, I'm going to go with Wes Anderson's The Royal Tenenbaums. This is actually my favorite Wes Anderson film, and it's a movie that deals with very broken people and their family dynamics. And for me, it's a melancholy film that always resonated with me. It came out when I was, a lonely 20-year-old or whatever when it first came out. And so it hit all kind of the right notes for me. The humor was razor sharp. It was a very dark sense of humor. It had a lot of sadness to it, a lot of tragedy to it. And all the emotional notes landed for me. Along the way, the cast here is just bonkers crazy, all the people that are inside of this movie. And so for me, this is my favorite Wes Anderson film. For the year 2002, we're going with The Bourne Identity. I actually really enjoy amnesia action films, and this is the one that I think has kind of landed the most for me. It's the movie that kind of changed a little bit of the direction of Matt Damon's career as he became this action hero out of nowhere. He had been Good Will Hunting, screenwriter of Good Will Hunting, and then now he's the spy guy that can beat anybody up as Jason Bourne. Along the way, I love that they balanced him out with a girl, and so he had a little bit more personality to him. So this is actually my favorite of the Bourne films. It's a spy film. It's got some great action to it, and it's an amnesia action film, so it has that extra little flavor to it that I very much enjoy. For the year 2003, I kind of went back and forth. I had two movies listed out. Was I going to go with Pirates of the Caribbean? Was I going to go with Elf? And I decided to go with Elf on this one. I just love this movie. I watch it every Christmas like 3 different times. It's probably Will Ferrell's best film, at least from my estimation. It just lands on so many different levels when it comes to the humor. It's just in a movie that your kids can laugh at, that you can laugh at the same time. It's got some little family element drama inside of it without being too heavy-handed, and it just puts a big gigantic grin on your face. Now, like I said, I went back and forth and putting the Pirates of the Caribbean here instead, because that's a great adventure film at the high seas that changed the trajectory of Johnny Depp's career. So I went back and forth, but I gotta say, I rewatch Elf a lot more than I rewatch Pirates of the Caribbean. For 2004, we're gonna go with Spider-Man II, the second Spider-Man movie, a great comic book film, a great sequel, and it takes a lot of the great things about the original one. It takes them to the next level. Like the train sequence in Spider-Man 2, I think is one of the great action sequences in a superhero movie of all time. One of the best directed, as it captures the excitement of the danger of the situation, as well as the character himself as just kind of this young guy trying to save his city, and the city embracing him in that situation. So for me, even though I've said in my videos that I've had Spider-Man 1 over this one and had some different thoughts on this one, so people like fired back at me like really angry about my take on Spider-Man 2. I really like Spider-Man 2. I'm not trying to put Spider-Man 2 down. I thoroughly enjoy it. 2005, we're going Batman Begins. For me, this is a great and really probably the definitive origin story for Batman. In the comics and in the cartoons and stuff, they haven't necessarily had one story that's kind of concisely told it the way that this film was able to do that. And I love origin stories, as I've mentioned many times. I love people's potential being discovered as they discover their purpose. And that's a lot of what this movie is all about. Christopher Nolan just has a way of telling stories and just slightly out of order to give it that extra spice and pizzazz to it. And that's what this movie does so well at times. And so I just love this movie. I go back and forth as to whether I like this one or The Dark Knight more. Depending on which video I do, this one can come out above The Dark Knight. 2006, I went back and forth on 2 movies. Do I go with the Bond film Casino Royale or do I go with Rocky Balboa? I had to go with Rocky Balboa. I love the Rocky franchise. I love Sylvester Stallone might be my favorite actor. Rocky Balboa might be my favorite movie character of all time. But most importantly on this one, this is the first movie that I saw in the theater after getting married. Some people do a lot of different things on their honeymoons. My wife and I went to go see Rocky Balboa in the theater on our honeymoon. That's what we were up to. I don't know what other people do, but I thought this was a great continuation of the series and a great bookend to Rocky's story by itself of trying to find a way to make him an underdog again, explore where he would be in life, and closing things out in a better place than Rocky V left things out. And 2007, this was a tricky one. I didn't have an obvious pick for this year, so my pick is a little bit out there in left field, not one that you would expect, but I'm gonna go with Enchanted. I just thought that this film was delightful, which is a movie or word I don't normally use to describe movies, but this is a case where it fits properly. The music's great, and Amy Adams in this lead role just does such an amazing job of being a Disney princess brought to the real world. And I like this movie more than most of the animated films that it's kind of having fun and playing against and doing this real world version of it. It just does it so well. So I love this one. 2008. This is hard. You've got Iron Man and you've got The Dark Knight, and they came out just a few months apart from each other. How do you pick between those two? But especially given that the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the thing that was started by Iron Man, has kind of changed the trajectory of my life because of this whole YouTube channel, and the MCU movies are a big part of what's made this channel grow. Which one do I gotta pick? I gotta go with The Dark Knight. I gotta go with it. Both fantastic, but I gotta go with The Dark Knight. It's just one of the great comic book movies of all time because it, in a lot of ways, transcends the genre. It's not trying to be a comic book movie. It's trying to be a great crime thriller. And in doing so, crafts kind of these interesting characters, this deep plot with government politics, politicians thrown into the mix. The Joker is this insane force of chaos in the mix. All in all, it has deep themes, deep emotions to it, and it just works for me. 2009, I'm gonna go with Star Trek 2009, the reboot. For me, I know some people have been critical of JJ Trek. If you take it, it's on its own terms. It's not as cerebral as the old stuff. It's not trying to do what the old stuff did. Take it on its own terms as this big roller coaster ride with Star Trek characters and some Star Trek-y things thrown in the mix. I had a lot of fun with these movies. The first one in particular touches once again on this recurring theme throughout many of these. People's untapped potential. That's at the core of the first act of this film, as Kirk is kind of wasting away, not using his potential, and Pike goes and recruits him. I literally took a job after watching the trailer for this movie with the speech from Pike to Kirk about untapped potential and father issues, all that fun stuff. So for me, this is a movie that's very watchable. It doesn't have the intellectual depth of a lot of other Star Trek, and some of that I think is unfortunate, but on its own terms, I have an absolute blast with this film. As we go into the final stretch, remember to tell me down below in the comments section, what are some of your favorite movies from the years that you have been alive? Also, if you've enjoyed this video, consider checking out one of these videos up above after this one. One of those is my 10 favorite movies of all time from any time periods, and I can double up on years, and so you can check that up here, or my picks for the 10 best comic book movies of all time. If you enjoyed this video, there's definitely something in one of those two videos that you will love. Let's move into the year 2010, and we're going with Inception, another Christopher Nolan film where he just found a way to tell this very interesting sci-fi story about going into people's minds, exploring the idea of dreaming, how time works inside of dreams, telling a compelling story, and also having a movie that had an ambiguous ending where you could take it several different ways, and he planted little hints about each and every one of them. Whichever way you fall as to whether that little spindle fell over at the end, whether the top kept spinning or not, there's evidence as to each of the different paths of where this could be going, and I love that. Apparently he spent like 10 years writing the script for this film, and I think it shows because it's so well crafted in such a manner that everything fits together. Once again, great performances, so I love this one. 2011, we're going with one of the underrated films of all time, most underrated films of all time, Warrior. This is an MMA film starring Joel Edgerton and Tom Hardy, and it is just fantastic. Like, it is one of the greatest Rocky movies of all time without being a Rocky movie. It's a movie that the drama in the first hour sets up so many pieces just perfectly that when you get to the second half of the film and the MMA tournament starts, it's an hour straight of every 5 minutes just the biggest moments of like, yeah, victory you will ever see in a movie. And it just keeps building and building. The family drama works. The MMA action is awesome. This is literally the movie that I probably cheer while watching it the most. And I've seen it a bazillion times. I've shown it to as many people as I can. If you haven't seen Warrior, that is your homework assignment after this video. After you watch those other videos right up there, go watch Warrior. 2012, I've got to go back to my MCU roots. The Avengers, the event comic book movie of the time when it came out, because finally all these franchises converged into one mega blockbuster, The Avengers, and it paid off. The banter between the characters was fun, the rivalry between the characters was fun, and the final third act of this film is one of the most fun third acts of any film that I can think of. One of the best third acts in a comic book movie, just fun. There's movies that have more emotional punch to them, have bigger spectacle, but when it comes to just like, yes, grin on your face, fun, The Avengers, I think, takes it for me. 2013, I gotta go with Man of Steel. I'm a big fan of Superman, and this is a movie when I first saw it, I was a little bit lukewarm on it. Obviously, Zack Snyder does this kind of deconstruction of Superman, less hopeful than the character normally is, a much darker, brooding take on it. And so it was a little bit off-putting to me at first. I still liked it, but I was like, I'm not quite sure about this. But every time I rewatch it, the more I watch it on its own terms, it's a film that I've grown to love and love to rewatch over and over and over again. I think some of the action in it is fantastic. Some of the themes and deeper ideas inside of it land for me, and so it makes it onto the list. 2014, I am going with Guardians of the Galaxy. This is a personal favorite MCU film for me. I have so many fond memories of it because it was such a weird film for them to make. They decide to make a movie about a talking raccoon in the talking tree that only says "I am Groot," from James Gunn, this guy that had done all these weird, dark, hard R comedies and wrote Dawn of the Dead and worked for Troma. So like, what is the MCU doing? And then they got the guy from Parks and Rec to star in it. And then I went to go see it, and it was just such a pleasant surprise. Even as I was watching through it, they didn't market Drax as being a funny character in any of the marketing. They didn't play up his sense of humor. And so then the first time he cracks a joke about slitting a throat, like, why would you draw a line on her neck? Like, it was just such a amazing moment. I was like, is that where this is going? And that is where it went. And the whole movie was so quotable. The team had such chemistry with one another. So a movie that I just loved. 2015, I'm gonna go with Star Wars: The Force Awakens. As I mentioned before, I'm a big fan of J.J. Abrams' work in that he makes movies that are just kind of a roller coaster ride. As soon as they get going, it just keeps going until the credits roll at the end. And that's what he did with Star Wars. He took kind of the story template of A New Hope and just gave it this 21st century roller coaster ride pacing to it. And I had a ton of fun with it. I thought it was funny. There's some cool action sequences, especially the chase with the Millennium Falcon on Jakku. Just a bunch of the stuff worked for me. It was so pleasant to have Star Wars back on the big screen and be good again. And so it's a movie that I know it has its critics. In certain ways it hasn't aged well, and because of The Last Jedi, there's a lot of this movie, I loved it when it came out, and I still have a lot of fun with it. Before I give you my final few, remember, if you want a free audiobook, you can get a free trial of Audible at the link down below, audibletrials.com/Sean Chandler. You get a free book. I love Audible. I highly recommend you check it out. For 2016, we're gonna go with Captain America: Civil War, or really Avengers 2.5 is what the movie kind of is. And what I loved about this movie wasn't just that you had the Avengers battling each other, but the central conflict I thought made sense. That Captain America and Tony Stark would have very different worldviews as to how the government should be involved with them in particular, based off of the previous films and their experiences. Tony Stark is the guy that invented Ultron. Captain America is the guy that was in Winter Soldier and has been seeing corrupt totalitarian governments and does not trust them. It makes sense that they would clash and have different takes on all this. And I love that competing worldviews are what drove the plot of the film in that regard. 2017, we're gonna go with The Disaster Artist. This is a movie that is telling the story of how the movie The Room came into existence. The worst movie ever made, one of the most delightful worst movies of all time. And I just thought that this movie was a great exploration of friendship, a very weird friendship and the way we have dynamics with people and dysfunctionality. But it was a movie that really was all about friends. And I thought that that was so cool the way that worked. It's really funny. There's great performances. It's interesting as to how this monstrosity of a film that's such a glorious film that's so watchable and has endured the test of time has existed out there, how it came into existence. That's all very interesting. And so I loved this movie, and I checked out the book too, and the book might even be better. It has even more weird stuff inside of it. So actually, maybe if you want that Audible free trial, check out The Disaster Artist, the book, audibletrials.com/Sean Chandler. Sorry for pushing stuff so much. I didn't even think about that as it just came to mind, that you should check that one out if you haven't yet. For 2018, the movie that worked the best for me, that put the biggest grin on my face, that made me love movies the most, was Avengers Infinity War, the most epic comic book movie of all time, where they took all of these characters, brought them together into one film. You got space, you got battles on Earth, so many different things going on. I love seeing the characters interact. I loved Thanos as the villain. I loved the very bold move at the end. Made a lot of people mad. A lot of people, it didn't work for them, but they knew that was going to happen. That some people would think, you're teasing me. It's just a cliffhanger. It's not a complete story. And they went for it. I just love that this movie exists. And the ending worked for me. I mean, it just absolutely felt like it was a complete story for me, and it made me at the same time go, I can't wait to see what's gonna happen next. So for me, I loved Infinity War, and it's just a fantastic comic movie, and I love that we live at a time where things like that exist. And that finally brings us to 2019, my favorite movie of 2019. I gotta go with Glass. Now it is January. I've only seen 4 movies this year, so it's probably not gonna stay at number 1 for too much longer. Remember to check out one of these videos right over here with some of my other best of lists. Try out that audibletrials.com/Sean Chandler to get your free audiobook of How Star Wars Conquered the Universe or The Disaster Artist. Thank you so much for watching this long video, and keep talking movies too much in 2019.